Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we've got somebody from Tampa Bay. Well, not really quite Tampa Bay, but Florida nonetheless. And they just won the Super Bowl. So pretty exciting to be speaking to him. His name is Mike Giannulis, and he has just created a lot of businesses, multiple 7- and 8-figure companies that he's created, been the CEO, copywriter, marketer. All those things are good and they're great, and those kind of define his professional life. But more importantly, and I think this is true with many of our guests, but not everybody makes a point to make sure that everybody knows, and that is that he's a husband, he's a father, he's a son. He's a real human. You know, sometimes it's easy to get distracted and not see these people as people, because they just are on the screen or they're behind their desk or something, but they're actually real people. And that's what I'm excited to talk about with Mike today, is how real he is and what he did to get to where he is, because it's there for everybody. Everybody here is worth being remembered, and with the right effort and intention, we can all achieve that. So how do we do that? So go ahead, Mike, introduce yourself as far as like your story. Let us know where you came from, why you ended up doing what you're doing, what are you doing now, and where do you see yourself in the future?
Sure. So my name, as you said, is Mike, and I am from Tampa Bay. Technically, that's the whole area. From a smaller town called Tarpon Springs, which is few people have been there, but a lot of people know about it. We're very famous for sponges, which is quite the thing to be famous for. But I started sort of on the business journey almost from the time that I was a kid. I won't go back through all of that, but I was always the kind of person that was trying to figure out how to sell stuff or what kind of things I could do. And I remember when I turned 18, one of the first things I got, which was actually a very bad thing, was a credit card. And the very first thing I bought was a real estate, no money down course. It was the very first thing I bought with a credit card. And that kind of opened my mind, though, to this, other world of ways to be creative and to kind of take care of yourself. And I sort of stumbled around in my late teens into my early 20s. I dropped out of high school actually for one semester. I was able to go back and kind of graduate still on time, but I had to take a few extra things, but that was big for me. But then even going to school or going to college after that, I kind of I just couldn't find myself there, and ultimately ended up dropping out of college and probably had 30 or 40 grand of student loan debt. And then I just tried different things. I remember being one of my most sort of famous things that I did was I think around age 20, I tried to start a dairy goat farm, and we had over 500 pregnant dairy goats, all set to have kids at the exact same time within 1 month. And that was a disaster. I always say, don't go down that route. But from there, I finally started to find myself around age 24, when I finally took a job as a copywriter. And if you know me at all, like, I did not want a job. I was like, I don't want a job. I want to be my own boss, blah, blah, blah. But the person that offered me the job, she convinced me just to give it a try. And I didn't even know at the time what a copywriter was. You might not know either, but that's a person that writes ads for companies. So be it from, we're talking about the Super Bowl, the people that write those ads are technically also copywriters. And there's also the longer form stuff. So you might call it like junk mail. You get it in the mail, and it's all these long story ads. So I was more on that side, where I learned to write what's called long form direct response copywriting. And through that, I was able to sort of pivot that skill set. And it took me years to finally figure it out. But once I did, I was able to write sites on the web that would then go on to make, very, very good amounts of income for myself and my various companies. Obviously, there's no promises that anyone can do that, but it's definitely worth the pursuit if it's what you like. And for me, I always like to write, and I always thought it was fun to sell, and so it fit me well. So I was able to sort of ride that all the way to current day. With, of course, there's ups and there's downs, and I've been through everything. Any kind of like business thing that you can think of, I've been through it, from like partner breakups to lawsuits to all this drama that comes. I've had to let go of my best friend. I've had to let go of my mom, even at one point, from a little side job, so there's been ups and there's been downs. But I think the main thing for me, what really shifted it, was when I started to realize that instead of writing copy for other people, I could write copy for myself, and I could create my own products, my own programs, my own things. And once you know how to sell, that really opens up the door for you. So my biggest company, we were able to grow that to, I think, right around 20 million a year in gross sales. And that particular company sold like Shopify stores and helped people set up Shopify. And now I've kind of shifted out of that industry, and I work more now with health and supplements. So we look for companies that are doing okay or are kind of struggling, and we take them over in that space, and we kind of go through and we update their copy, their branding, their marketing, their angles, their product line, and we help to scale them up. And that's been extremely fun, and it's a thing that I enjoy quite a bit. So I feel like I talked forever, but that's sort of a quick recap.
Cool. Well, I love it. I've got a lot of questions here for you. That's what I love about these conversations. So just really quick, just because I'm newly discovering this, I'm curious if you've discovered it yet, but Clubhouse, have you ever been on the app Clubhouse?
So I have my invite, but I don't have an iPhone. So
an
iPhone. I'm an Android guy. I'm not an Apple guy. But I do have to find my old iPad, because I found out that I can get on there with my iPad. But the funny thing is, and maybe this shows my age, I was never on these, but I recall them, or people talking about them. But I'm pretty sure in the 1980s, we already had Clubhouse, but they called it a party line. And I'm pretty sure like 10 people would call on the same phone line, and they would all just chat. It wasn't me, but I think like my mom was on those, so I feel like everything comes back through. I think Clubhouse is a great concept, in the fact that but I think their current power comes from the fact that they're pulling really, really high end people to be on there. I don't know if you want to just jump on there to hear Joe Blow talk about something, right? But if it's Elon, yeah, great, So it's sort of, it's almost like an interactive live podcast in that sense. So it's just like a podcast in the sense that it's like a live podcast. But I think the quality of the app will be determined by the quality of the users. So once this may be a case of sort of a reverse network effect. So, like Facebook, the more people that joined it, the more of a value it had. Clubhouse may, in fact, be the opposite, because the more people you add, you're going to, by the very nature of it, you're going to decrease quality. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's just me. I don't know anything about it. I'm not invested in it. I don't know anything. That's just a thought that I just had right now here on the spot, because it's going to come down to like really being able to control quality and to make it easy to find what it is you want to find. So it's going to be a lot of that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I've just been dabbling in it. I had a friend send it to me, my invite, and I was like, okay, let's get on this. But that's exactly how I described it to my wife today. I was like, it's basically like an interactive live podcast, but you can for the right person who knows how to monetize it, get on there. Like I was listening yesterday to like 2 hours of just joint venture capitalists who were just hearing pitches. So it was like 1,000 people in the room, like, hey, you got 5 minutes, pitch us, And if we're interested, we'll reach out. And I'm like, this is crazy because unlike any like Shark Tank where they give you some feedback, say, hey, you sucked at this, da, da, da. And it was like live coaching from these junior venture capitalists all around the world. So that's somebody from Australia, somebody from Africa, like all these different places all around the world. You can now get the practice of pitching your whatever immediately. And then I was on another one on like branding, and they had MC Hammer. MC Hammer was on there talking about how he branded himself and how it all worked out. He's like, if another song on my first album would have been the hit song, my brand would be completely different. But because this one song was the one that everybody liked, then my brand took off another direction. So anyway, it's really interesting there, but I think how that applies to the reason I brought that up is how it applies to copywriting is a lot of people, well, one, a copywriter is not just a machine. So that's not that it is not a machine, it could be, but that's very archaic, back in the 80s, just like what you're saying. It's an older thing, but a copywriter, copy is I think it is business. Like if you can't write copy or have somebody who can write copy, it's interesting. And I had a guest on my show, Chuck Downs. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's actually out there in Florida as well. Lives on one of the islands that's just out there. You have to take a boat to it. But he hired screenwriters and copywriters to write his keynote speeches.
Yeah.
And you think, well, why would you hire somebody like a copywriter who's primarily trying to sell something or trying to have good online content or written content? Why would you hire them to be your speechwriter? And it's because they understand how it works. So I'm curious, where did you learn? Obviously you were doing it, but how did you really learn how to be good at copywriting? Like, what was your process of learning to be good at copywriting? Yeah,
that's a great question. So firstly, and this is true, the cool part about this is true for pretty much everything. Phase one is always like brute force exposure, right? So I just probably read like 8 or 9 copywriting books, had no idea what they were saying. Okay, headlines. Okay, I assume that's the first part of it. Okay, leads. What's that? Is that, what's a bullet point? Okay, let's see what that is. And so, you're getting all these words thrown at you.
It's like learning a whole new language.
Right? And you don't know what's going on. But the key is, I call this the confusion illusion. And that is, in order to learn, you must pass through a stage of confusion. And the problem is most people think that makes them stupid. If I'm confused, I'm stupid, I quit. No, I'm confused means you're on the right track because your brain is being sent signals to reorganize and figure this out. So when you jump in, you have to expose yourself to the whole thing as much as you possibly can. And you have to go into it with the idea that it might take 3 or 6 months for your brain to reconfigure all these things. Now, the advantage that you'll have as you get older is humans, we very much connect things, right? So we learn by saying, oh, this is like that, like we just did. Clubhouse is like a live podcast. Bam, we got it because we had experience with a podcast. So if you have something that you can relate it to, then you'll always find a way to keep it in your brain more, and you'll find a better way to kind of program out that structure. So for me, I thought about it because I did have practice writing poetry, books, and things like that. So I was able to say, okay, well, this is like writing, but instead of getting people to like learn something or take something from it, I need to get them to bust out a credit card, punch it into a computer screen and hit buy now. So, and that was one of the big discoveries. And like you brought up how the guy hired copywriters. In some ways, the hardest thing you can ever do is to sell someone cold with just the written word. Sometimes we get moved because someone wrote a poem and everyone's sad about it, or we read a book and we feel inspired. But those are just in some ways, and again, I'm not trying to take from them because they are hard, but you're basically playing with formulas. you know, if the old dog dies saving the kid, you're going to cry. Because that dog, he sure had a fight in him. He saved that kid, right? We're going to all cry because it's sad. But when it comes to like writing sales, you've got to really overcome amazing amounts of people that are skeptical. You've got to get their attention, which is the toughest thing that there ever could be right now. And then from that point, you've got to come up with what kind of pain point are they in now? What are the problems that they have right now? What do they want? What do they think they want? What do they actually need? And is there a way to connect all those into something that'll actually inspire them to want to change? And then you got to come up with a product and a price and a program, and the whole thing has to all make sense. And, so for again, I went kind of off here, but that was the big key for me was brute force. And then I would write again and again and again. And I remember almost the advantage I did have was I worked for someone who that was what she did. So every time I would write something, I would turn it over to her. She would read it and be like, this is awful. Change this, fix this, change this. And I remember this just like it was just yesterday, sitting in her office. And this is probably the 8th or 9th draft that I had done. And I thought for sure, this is good. This is my best work ever. And she read it again and she was just like, no, this is still awful. You got to go back again. And I really thought there is no way I could possibly write anymore. There's no way. And yet I almost could have cried. And that's not me at all. But I felt like I could just quit now and just cry. But I sat there again for probably like 10 hours straight overnight, just stayed there and rewrote the whole thing and turned it into her again. And she was like, that's better. And like, I was like, I think I did. I think I'm turning that corner. I remember that thought, and it wasn't good still, but it began. And then over time, so I say it took me a solid year. And that's a big point that I want everyone to take, is that there are very, very few unreal goals, but there are many impossible timelines, right? We set these timelines that aren't possible. The goal is possible, but not in the timeline we think. And that's where people fail all the time, because they're like, oh, I'm going to grow my company by triple in the next 6 months. Listen, statistically, you're not. Right now, you tell me you're going to triple it in the next year and a half, 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, probably could. Right. But you got to set real timelines. And I think this is where goals sometimes take us off track. I'm actually trying to write a book on this whole entire thing. But I think that goals, while they mean well, often set people up to fail because we're pushed to dream so big that we dream too big and we can't possibly reach that. And we end up saying, what's the point? I think instead of goals, we need to begin to view things as projects, right? If you set a project, you have a timeline, you have a deadline, you have a pathway, you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C. If this happens, I'm going to do this. If I need help, I'm going to go to this person, right? A project is really what a goal should be. And that's the whole entire concept, because I've been able to do some pretty cool things. And I think that most of it is because I view my goals as a project. I don't ignore obstacles. I find them and I make a plan of how I'm going to go through them, or around them, or even make them part of my strategy, right? Mm-hmm. You can do that if you approach it with your eyes wide open. If you just say, I'm going to hit this goal and I'm going to do it and I'm going to be motivated. Yeah. That literally would probably not work. And it sounds bad. And I'm actually a very motivational guy. I grew up on all of that stuff. But the older I get, the more I see that you've got to be projects or greater than goals. And that's what you need to begin to think about.
Yeah, no, I love that. Just recently, I went and spoke at a conference, and because the demographic of the conference, because I've been speaking on for a few years now, and the demographic of who's coming is changing. And so my revenue was coming from one source. And with this last one, a lot of the people that came to the conference, they, from their perception, they already have what I offer. And so the value add wasn't there as much. So I was talking to my wife and I was like, look, this is what I'm learning from this event, is that I need to shift my presentation, because they aren't seeing the value because they think they already have what I offer, and really they don't. And it worked really well for a lower mindset person because they haven't ever thought about it, right? So now I'm dealing with people who have thought about it, think they have it situated, and now I've got to take that person into my camp as well. And it was just really fascinating. She's like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to keep speaking at these conferences if the people already have what you need, right? And I'm like, no, this is not the solution. The solution is now I just need to adjust my presentation to pre-address the fact that they already think they have what they need. So they still are excited to meet with me and their spouses are and things. So it's just really funny, the difference of how somebody would view it. Oh, well, I guess there's already a need. I'm going to go somewhere else and stick with people who don't have that need fulfilled yet. Or, hey, these people, they may already have the need, but if I can do the need 10% better or 15% better than their previous person that's fulfilling for them, then they're going to want to work with me. But how do I show that value on stage? And so it's just funny that whole conversation. How do you respond to rejection? How do you respond to, oh, the need's already there, fulfilled? Do you give up, or do you say, okay, well, how do I adjust what I'm offering or adjust my presentation of what I'm offering so that they still see the value? And
yeah, that's a great point. And that's just something that I sort of kind of found on my own path. But then when I met other people, they're like, yeah, that's what I do too. And so it's kind of like we all kind of found the same thing. And that's the idea that when you're selling, and again, I hate this metaphor, but it does make sense, in that you're using the problem or the pain or whatever your product solves. You're basically bringing the knife and you're cutting those things open. And you're doing that because you believe in what you're going to sell, and you believe that if they do it and they apply it and they put it to use, they'll get a way better outcome. But people don't buy without being moved in some way, either towards pleasure or away from pain, right? So many times we use problems or we use pain. We have to kind of have that little knife and we sort of cut that open. But the interesting part is you always need to correlate the pain with the solution. So your job when you write copy or when you speak on stage is you're going to reiterate those pain points. You're going to cut them open. And it just so happens that the salve, the answer to those cuts, is what your product solves. So you basically are going to look for what are the 3 or 4 main problems that particular audience faces. And then how does your product, what 3 or 4 features or benefits of your product solve that particular problem or those problems. And the cool part is when you do it right, they're like, wow, that's every problem I have and exactly what solves it. Now, little do they know we handpicked them, right? We handpicked the 3 answers. But if they're true and they're compliant, then great, you're set, And so what you brought up is a great point. And this is something that's talked about in a book called Breakthrough Advertising. And that is that awarenesses change. The market changes, awareness changes. When I started way back in the day, it was 2006, I started. And by 2007, one of the things I did kind of on the side, I started probably one of the first blogging courses. Because back then it was a big deal because you had to install it yourself. I spent like a week trying to install a database, and all this stuff. But anyway, point is now I could never sell that because it's like you can go to blogger.com or WordPress.com and click, bam, you got a site. But back then it was cool. So over time, your audience does change. And so you've got to grow along with them. But it sounds like what you're dealing with is sort of the idea of you've got an audience that thinks they know the right thing, but in reality, they probably don't. And so they're probably doing themselves more harm than they ever think they are. And that's sort of something that sales process is what I call the unlearning process. So you have to do the whole thing and I don't know what you sell, so I'm sorry for that. But if it was like podcasting, right, it would be like, so to start a great podcast, you need a great microphone, right? Wrong. Here's why everything you thought about podcasting is absolutely incorrect. And if you don't get this right, you'll never find the success you want. Now you've now killed one of what they think is the big thing, right? I'm just making that up, but it could be whatever it is, or whatever that thing is that they think it is. Say it, tell them wrong, and then give them the benefit with curiosity. and they'll be sucked in. So I would even open my talk with that, depending upon how aware the audience is. I would say, I'm here because so many people come to me and they tell me that A, B, C, and D is true. But guess what? It's not. And here's why. And then you go into your talk, It's about meeting the audience. And I think you're already onto this anyway, but it's about meeting the audience where they're at. And what it sounds like you're dealing with people that already are at a certain point. So you're joining the conversation that's in their head. Mm-hmm. And you're going from there. So I think you're on the right track. So.
Yeah. It's just funny to see how different people respond to it. I'm curious about something else you said kind of early on, and that is, you mentioned multiple times that you had to let people go. You had partner breakups. You have these things. A lot of people who are listening to this. They are from not just business, but from all walks of life. Whether they're parents, just as you said, your husband, your son, your father. You're all of these things, and every one of us is all of these things. It's so easy to compartmentalize our roles in life and say, if you're at work, well, who are you? Well, I'm the CEO, right? But really, it's like, who are you? Oh, I'm a father, I'm a son. I like to play baseball on the weekends, whatever it is, right? But we tend to answer the question, who are we, based on, and maybe this isn't always bad, but the context of where the question's being asked. And the reason I'm introducing this question that way is sometimes it's those two worlds or multiple worlds can become intertwined, and then it becomes difficult to have crucial conversations, have these tough conversations, because you may be your son, a brother, a best friend, whatever, and you want to maintain that aspect of the relationship. But then when it comes to the business or to the religion or whatever it is, those aspects, those contracts, social contracts, those are going to be changing. And so how do you manage and mitigate that with like, hey, this aspect of our life, I hope we can stay the same over here, but in these other categories, there's going to be some major shifts, and I hope you can handle that, even though I still hope that we can have this relationship. I don't know if that makes sense clearly, but I really want to understand, how do you have these tougher conversations, and how would you coach somebody else through those tough conversations?
Yeah, well, point number one is I hope you never have to.
Sure. Like that's going to happen.
But it does come up. And I will say this, I don't want to come off like I'm the expert on this, because this is something that I struggle with myself, because I'm a very people first, family first, friends, guy. And so for me, it's always hard. One of my actual answers has always been having a really good business partner who is a lot better at that than me. So, to be honest, he's been able to step in and do some of the tougher ones. When it comes to people that I know, like friends and family and stuff, I've just found being honest with them, being transparent, and making sure they know early is a big thing. I think that's one thing that I found out. I had a really good friend of mine. We had to let go of his wife, and she worked in a different company, but in our same kind of family. So I let him know right away. And he was so thankful, because then he didn't have to deal with her coming in upset and him not knowing what was going on. So that's one thing that if there is like family or friendship there, you obviously want to, let them know early, because I think that's where a lot of the problem comes from. You'll see them saying, you know what, I would have been fine with it if you just told me. I had to find out from some random guy on a Tuesday, right? You could have said it, so I could have been more mentally there. So that's probably one big thing. And I think too, when those things do come up, and this has just been my experience, I've not had a single person yet that I've ever had to let go of that didn't go on to do something better, find a better job, or have a better thing occur. I've never met someone that said like, oh, when you let me go, my life fell to shambles and I've been awful ever since. It's always been, I finally took a chance and I did this thing. I decided to go stay here, and I met this girl, and we're in engaged now. You know what I mean? Like, there's always been good things. So I think sometimes we all get stuck in a rut, and it feels like life has a way sometimes of getting us kicked out of that. And it's painful, but oftentimes it opens up the door to things that we would never have done before that. So I kind of go into it with that thought too, that this is probably best for them and for me longer term. And so far, everyone has been fine. I haven't had any of those things. And I think also when you're clear with them from the family or friends side early on, it's not a shock. What I mean? Like they understand it. It wasn't like, hey, things are great. Hey, you're out of here. It was, hey, we're having this problem, or we just lost this big customer, so they know it. There's talk in the air.
Yeah, I think that's huge, is being communicative before the tough conversation. Chances to, I don't know if I would say even chances, but areas for improvement. Because I think of this as like a father and to my son and my children. Like, how do I coach my children through these tough conversations? At what point do you say, look, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable? And there's a hard line, like you get kicked out of the house versus, hey, like, let's work on this. And so that's one area. And then also just in everyday relationships, especially with your significant others, sometimes you have to have tough conversations and renegotiate as two different people evolve. And this, I imagine, is very similar to business partners. I don't have very many business partners that have any say in my business outside of my wife. And so I don't have to worry about too much there. But when you think about it, when you think of who are your business partners or your relationship partners, how are you, as you guys are both growing, how are you adjusting those contracts and addressing the conversations before they become this massive wedge that splits the tree and there's no hope of redeeming an actual cordial relationship? How do you have those conversations and make sure that there's enough forewarning? Yeah,
it's just about being upfront, being transparent, being open, being honest. There's so many times I think that most of the problems that we face in life are problems that we create through avoidance, right? How many medical problems could be resolved if we went to the doctor right when it first happened, right? But I'm fine, I'll be okay, and we drag it out, and then we have this way bigger issue. So that is something that's important, and for me, that's hard. Like, I'm not naturally a confrontational type. My wife is. She loves it, thrives on it. She's like, let me at him. She's like, for her, it's fun. But for me, I'm like, oh, I feel so bad about it. But that's, so again, you will, don't feel bad. Don't just assume that every person is gonna be easy. It's not, right? But there are things that you can do that maybe they can't do. So you can also, if you do have help, if you do have partners and things like that, find your strengths. I've often said this, and I still think it's true. You're better off to build your strengths than you are to try to fix your weaknesses. Not saying to ignore them, but the value of the time invested is way more by turning a skill that you're in an 80 into a 90 versus going from a 40 to a 50, right? The value add is so much more. So do lean into your strengths. And, but again, if you have to have those tough, conversations, the best thing to do is go do it. And easy to say, right? So easy to say, but.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, because that's actually one of the things I wrote down about you is, you dropped out of high school, you dropped out of college. There was a lot of things that could have been better, but then when it came down to it, you took what skills you had and you used those to your advantage. I want you to dig into that a little bit here, because the other thing that I see often is that you're not paid to do what you think you're paid to do. So when I'm saying that, you are getting paid by another individual, another company for copywriting for their company. You are making them money. And oftentimes people think, oh, well, I just need to work for somebody else because that's what I get paid to do. And they don't recognize that the skill that they're actually performing for somebody else, they could actually perform for themselves and make significantly more money. Like, this is I firmly believe this. Some people argue with me and I don't care, but I think the fact that you have a job means you're underpaid. Like, there's just nobody who has a job that's overpaid, because no company, as a business owner, no company would pay you more than they think you're worth, or they wouldn't be paying you, right? They believe that at some point, the perceived future value, current value, whatever, of you working for them is more than what they're paying you, because there would be no reason for them to pay you if it ever gets unbalanced like that. So the very fact that you have a job is by definition a statement of the fact that you're underpaid, that the skills or value that you bring to society is more valuable than what you're being paid for.
Yeah, it's a great argument. So I see where you're coming from. You're towing close to the line of the Communist Manifesto, which is quite interesting, because there is this idea of labor exploitation, right? You have to view it when you own a company. Every person that you bring on, they're an investment to you, right? And so just like you wouldn't buy a piece of equipment that costs more than it brought in, obviously it wouldn't make financial sense or economic sense to buy an employee to their hours to make you under what they value that they create. So under the communist viewpoint, any excess production value above and beyond what you pay for is wage theft. Is how they view it. But I don't think that from a business owner perspective. I'm totally on for business owners. Exactly. You're saying that you're better off. That surplus value is better served with you as an individual doing your own thing. And I agree to the right people. See, I used to be like Mr. Gung-Ho, everybody can do it, everyone can do anything. But the more I've gotten older, there's a lot of people that their best bet's a job because they're not either mentally or emotionally or whatever stable to deal with the ups and downs of business life. Some people are, and I think that there's two types of people. There's producers and there's consumers. And I think that producers like us almost get in this sort of producer bubble where we're like, I read 3 books a week and I'm on 18 podcasts and I never watch TV anymore, because we've defined ourselves by production, where we look at the consumers and we're like, oh, they watch Netflix all day and they go and, watch whatever film comes out and they're watching Cardi B on, YouTube. And we're like, how dare they? But at the same time, without those consumers, there can be no artists. And so in a weird way, we thrive off of each other. I'm just thankful that I was born a producer. And I focus on that side of it all because the consumption side to me seems very empty. But again, I'm not a consumer, so I don't know. I'm sure I'm sure I am in some areas, but in general, for me, it's more fun to sit down and like write a blog post, do a podcast, interview, read a nonfiction book, write a book. Those are the things that drive me. My spouse, that she's not too bad, but for her, she just thinks I am boring. She's like, you're so boring, because we're into very different things. So anyway, I'll just say that's where I go off just a bit because I've seen people that I've tried to help and they just can't do it. And I don't know what it is. And I've worked hard. There's people I've tried for years to take them from a job to like, look, you could write 3 or 4 long form articles a month and make $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, more than you make now, have your own schedule. And they're like, yeah, I could, sure could. That's it. I said, I will give you leads. I will pay you myself. Just write this article by this date. Date comes, goes. You know what I mean? So it's just very hard for some time. Again, if I could solve this, I've almost twice now gone back to school for psychology because I want to conquer that. How do we get people to actually change and sustain that change? But it's all habits, I think. And so you've got to build those up. But again, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, no, you're right for sure. So I'm going to bring something up. Don't be offended. That's not my goal here. I think it's a really valuable lesson. So I'm always cautious when I bring stuff up like this. But so throughout this podcast, and maybe you don't hear this on the podcast, but I've noticed that you have somewhat of a little bit of a stutter. Is that accurate?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay. Yep. And so I want to bring this out because this is like such an amazing example. I know another person, I don't know if I can get him on the podcast, but he's got a real, like his stutter's worse than yours. And he's built a multi-million-dollar business. So to that point, copywriter, you're choosing to be on a podcast, you're choosing to do this, but you don't have to be out speaking and showing people the fact that you have this, I think it makes you more interesting and definitely helps people listen closer to what you're saying. So I think it's actually an asset, but beside that, like to put in perspective about stuttering, if you ever listen to a perfect and I say perfect in quotations, perfect public speaker who never stutters or never double takes their language, it's awkward to listen to because it's not how normal people speak. Yes. And so the best public speakers will actually go back and intentionally place stuttering type language into their public speeches so that they are more relatable. So some people will see a stutter and say, oh, that guy's never going to be successful. And you might adopt that belief. But then there's so many examples like yourself who said, well, I'm really good at writing, so it doesn't matter how good I can speak. Number one, I'm going to go build multi-million-dollar businesses. And if you talk to me on the street and I wasn't dressed up, you wouldn't know that I'm a multimillionaire because of I don't speak perfectly or whatever that means. Yeah. But then there's also that asset, or that's an asset to me. That potential liability becomes this huge asset in the speaking world. So speak to that. And was there ever a time that you felt less than, or that other people made you feel less than because of that? And how did you overcome that? Because there's people who listen to this, maybe it's not stuttering, but they have other physical or social impairments, if we want to call them that they think disqualify them for success, that really don't disqualify them, and in fact launch them toward success if they have the right mindset.
I'm glad you brought this up. So yeah, I've always had a really, really bad stutter, and I've had to work extremely hard to even get to this point that I'm at now. And it took me, I mean, I'm saying like practice and study, and I went to like a school, and I was like locked up in this little room for 12 or 13 days straight. And I was in this little room, and I would just be like, buh. The bear goes to, it was like just reading all this stuff. It was crazy hard. But yeah, I personally, this is very weird, but I do actually like my stutter because it gave me a really, really cool superpower. And that was growing up to be able to talk. What stuttering is like, if people don't know, I always say, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. You answer that question, but don't use the letter R in your response. What did you do yesterday? I'll ask you, but without the R, what did you do yesterday?
I went to my place of employment and helped individuals achieve their
there's a there. Yeah. So point being, that's what it's like for me in my head every single day since the time I was a kid. But the cool part for me was that you saw it. Your eyes were up and you were scanning your brain, right? Scan. So literally I've burned through so many ways to say the same exact thing. I'm like, I can't say stone right now. Maybe I can say rock. If I can't say rock, maybe I'll say pebble. Maybe I'll say this other word, right? So my brain is spin. And it's been like that forever. So I actually think it truly made me smarter. And I know for a fact it made me have a wider vocabulary which I think and then the best part of all, when I write, man, for me, it's like complete freedom. Because my fingers don't stutter, right? I can just say whatever I want, and it's like powerful. To me, it's like the perfect form of expression because I don't have to think, I don't have to like stop myself, I don't have to change what I would want to say. And so I think all those things made me a better person. And this is also weird, but I've probably spoken at 30 or 40 events, and I speak all the time. And the fact that I stutter some, I don't even care. I think it's cool. I think also it's cool because I want to show people, like, it doesn't matter. So many things that we think that people think about, they don't. Like the biggest problem we have is we have huge egos. And we think, oh, I stuttered there, people are going to care. They don't even notice. They don't care. Not that they don't, because they probably don't really, people don't care about you as much as you think they do. But two, you can serve as an example, right? I'm sure out there right now, there's a kid who's like stuttering really bad and thinks there's no hope for him. But then he sees someone like me and says, well, if that guy can do it, then perhaps I could too, right? So like everything that you do is just a chance to serve other people. And everything that you have occur in your life is truly a chance to overcome and to create and to be an example. So for me, it's just kind of cool. Like I'm actually thankful if they were to say, hey, we can completely get rid of your stutter. Yeah, part of me would think that was fun, but also I don't think I would, because I just enjoy it, and I like the way I talk now. And you're right. I mean, people, when I talk, they kind of like lean in some more, and it almost naturally created an interesting thing about me that people enjoy. I've even had my wife, she was like, your stuttering to me is just so cute. Like it actually helped me get her, which is right.
There you go.
So there is all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind it. And I think that most people, honestly, if you think about it, a lot of people that get big, and they do it almost because they have some issue, right? Like, oh, this person has no arms, let's put them on TV because they can swim, right? Like there's all these kind of things. Like in a weird way, your disability or whatever you want to call it gives you a greater audience because of the inspiring factor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I believe that, and I wanted you to have it come from you, because I think that there's so many people. It doesn't matter what your story is or what it is. What is the one thing? That one thing is your asset. And I didn't know exactly how the stuttering brain worked, but I just can see exactly how that would help from my limited experience trying to be a copywriter and write copy. It is not the easiest thing for me. Writing in general is not the easiest thing for me. Speaking is far more easier for Samuel than any form of writing, I think, will ever be. That being said, one of the hardest parts of writing copy is thinking, well, how could I say this in a way that's not just like the other person? How could I say the same thing in a different way that makes me stand out and that person look like they're just normal and average, right? And so that superpower really is a superpower when it comes to using that skill for copywriting. You're able to see other ways and think of other ways to express the same exact concept, sometimes in a simpler, easier way to digest than the previous guy.
Exactly. And you do that probably 8 or 9 times in one sales piece too. So you got to say the same thing in a different way 8 times. And that's just the way it is, because people need to hear it again and again. And you need to say it, type A, type B, type C, type D, and perhaps one of those will attract the right, it'll be the one that gets through.
Love it. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you or learn more from you, take any, I don't know what you have, courses, I know you have some things on YouTube, but if they wanted to learn from you, have a conversation with you and understand a little bit more about your businesses, what you've done, how would they get a hold of you? Where are you most active? Where can they learn from you?
Sure. So there's quite a few different options. I think the easiest place to start, I put up a site just for people that play your podcast. It's onlyonemike.com/FYL. And that's capital FYL. And Only One Mic is ONE. When you go there, there's a few different options. I have kind of 3 different things right now. One, if you're a business owner of any sort and you're trying to scale and grow, you can get access to my Scale Up newsletter. I push it. That comes out every Sunday, guaranteed to be 1,000 words or less, and it's free anyway. But because I know I hate when I subscribe to these things and I get like a 15,000 word like New Yorker magazine article, and I'm like, I don't have time for this. So I kind of keep it short and give an actionable tip. So that's for that. If you want to learn copy, I have a program that I have built called Copywriter Brain, and it's to help install a copywriter brain in your own brain, but also to build what's called a second brain, which is a database that you can pull from that has every copy and every research, everything you ever write can be pulled and found, like a Wikipedia of everything that is you. And that's very cool. So that's at copywriterbrain.com.
And that's an actual software?
So it is software, but the software currently is all third-party stuff. I've created the system to string it all together.
Okay, cool.
And I also do a deep dive training on what you need to research. Like, there's 22 different aspects of what you need to research. I can provide templates that you can drag and drop. So that, start with this, answer these 20 things and you'll be done, because then you can just pull them in. And it's a whole big thing there, but I'm really, really proud of that. It's something that I did kind of on the side. But it's kind of like my fun. It's what I do for fun. And then also as part of that, if you go to the main site, I have a newsletter for that too, and a free community for the copywriter stuff. So those are great. Socially, check me out on Twitter. I tweet way more than I should. I shouldn't be on there so much, but I just enjoy it. And Twitter is truly what you turn it into. Who you follow is like what you get in your head. So I follow like positive people, business people, things like that. So all my tweets are around that stuff. I stay out of the politics crap because that's not me. And I just focus on providing value. Of course, like you said, I'm on YouTube. I blog 3 different sites or 4 different sites now. So I have all that stuff. And I'm kind of weird in the sense that I'm not like a one train kind of guy. I'm doing, all kinds of things. And, but I just enjoy it. Like, that's what, drives me. Like, I kind of joke, like, my hobbies are more companies. That's what I like.
Yep. I agree. I feel very similar to that myself. So let's, go take some time to look at those links. Definitely go to the onlyonemike.com. So that's onlyonemike.com/FYL. So onlyonemike.com, and you'll have links there. And then Copywriter Brain. That sounds fascinating. I'm excited to check that out. But let's, this next section is called Legacy on Rapid Fire. Okay. So are you ready?
I'm ready as I can.
Okay. Well, we'll see where this goes. So what do you believe is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Good question. I think that I've got to learn to let go of doing everything that I want to do, and instead just do what I know I have to do.
Okay. And what is the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
I lost 300 pounds. Whole nother story.
Wow. Drop that at the end of the podcast.
I know.
Jeez, that's awesome. And what's your greatest success to this point in your life?
I think my greatest success so far was being able to bounce back from a very, very painful partner breakup, lawsuit, almost lost everything, had to file a business type bankruptcy, and be able to bounce back from that within a year and be kind of back to where I was. That was a big deal.
That's awesome. And if you had one secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you believe has contributed most to your success, what would you say that is, and how could we adopt it into our own lives?
Yeah, I think the biggest key is consistency and the realization that the outcome you want is within your reach if you're prepared to continue despite the obstacles and despite what appears to be apparent failure. So many times we think, I'll do this thing for a month, and if it doesn't pan out, I'll stop. Nothing works in a month. Everything takes at least 12 months to 24 months. And then kind of to kind of go on with that too, divorce yourself from outcome completely, and instead focus only on output. You cannot control the outcome. There's too many variables beyond our control. But what we can control is our output, what we do every day. If you focus on that, and that's how you win, and you define it by that, then you'll probably get the outcome that you want. But if you focus on the outcome, you're going to always be let down because you're going to be like, oh, I didn't get it. And that's a big problem. And then people quit. Yeah.
Love that. Okay. So the final question here is my favorite question. It's one of the reasons I do, pretty much the reason I do this whole podcast is this final question. But it is, we're going to pretend that you've died. Okay. And only your great grandchildren, they're sitting around the dinner table discussing your life, the impact that you left on the world, and your legacy. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
Wow. My hope is that they view me as sort of the patriarch of a family dynasty, and that I was the start of it, sort of the turning point for a group of people that are extremely wealthy, but down to earth, who actually give back and help Earth more than ever, or maybe by then space, right?
Yeah.
But, that's truly what I want. I want them to look back, and I want to be like a painting on the wall. And that's the old man that began the whole thing. That's kind of what I would like.
That's awesome. Love it. And I think you're on your way there. I think that setting the example is the number one key to any legacy, and then letting people know about it, obviously, which you seem to be good at through your copywriting. So fantastic. Please, again, if you're listening to this, go subscribe, like, comment, leave a review if you feel so inspired to do so. And then remember that you're worth being remembered, and we're here to help you show the world what it is you're worth being remembered for. So we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.